Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're designing 3 t-shirts for a clothing brand called Classy Beef. This is my second time working with this brand and I absolutely love it. It suits my style really well. This is going to be more of a design process video rather than a step-by-step tutorial. However, you still will be able to see what I'm doing in Photoshop to achieve these designs. Here's a cheeky little mood board I did put together at the start of the project. However, I did go into it with some pretty strong ideas, so I didn't end up mood boarding too much. If you find the video useful, you know what to do. Click the red button, like the video, and check out some of my other tutorials. To kick off this first design, we're just going to remove the background from this snake stock image I found, and we're going to add some torn edges and grain from the filter gallery. I wanted to start with this design in particular today because out of the 3 designs I made for Classy Beef, this one was the most challenging. I knew I wanted to make a snake design I'd seen quite a lot about and they just looked really cool. But this design, I couldn't make up my mind. I kept coming back to it. I kept changing things, and you're going to see that it's more of a real design process than my other videos where I've chopped it up nicely so it all looks cohesive. So once we're done with the effects, we're going to remove all of the black out of the snake, so we're just left with the white. And as I've explained in other videos, this is so when the design is printed on the t-shirt, the black will be made up by the material of the shirt, so the printer doesn't have to actually print black. And in my personal opinion, this looks much better and much more professional. So now we're going to do a little bit of maintenance on the snake itself, because as you can see, the torn edges and grain, they've mostly done a good job, but we've lost a lot of detail on the right side of the face. So we've lost that other tooth. It kind of blends into the mouth a lot, and the eye as well. So what I'm doing here is taking the pen tool, making a selection of the tooth, and then bringing it onto its own layer. So I've got a copy of the tooth, and then I'm going to blend this into the other side so we can actually see 2 teeth. So now the basic snake's down, we can start adding in some text to try and build a rough layout of the shirt so we kind of know what we're doing and what we're going for. So unlike the other 3 shirts I've done for this brand, this time they requested that Classy Beef be written as 1 word rather than 2 separate words, which means obviously that's going to make a very long word. And that's why I chose this font called De La Rocca. I think that's how you say it. I'm probably saying that completely wrong. But as you can see, even with a longer word, this font maintains presence. It fills out the shirt nicely. So this is a picture of a sun that I'm adding in. I'm not sure where I got this idea from, but it ends up looking pretty cool. I don't add any effects to the sun just yet because, like I've said at the start, this design I am kind of freestyling and I'm not really sure what I'm kind of doing with it yet. These are some 3D chains from Envato Elements I'm adding in, so I was able to get a sort of rough angle that I wanted. Again though, really not sure what I'm doing with these. I kind of had the idea that the snake could bite through the middle there, which is what I'm trying to line up. And then I end up trying to remove some of the chain links and trying to cover up the overlap with the spot healing brush, and it does not work whatsoever. So I end up kind of just leaving the chains where they are until I come up with my next bright idea. It was probably at this point where I wish I had gone into this design with more of a plan. However, it does come out really well, I think, in the end. It's just a little bit frustrating when you hit walls like this, and I kept coming back to this design. I started actually the other designs while I was doing this one because I kept losing track and I didn't know what I was doing with it, and I left it and went to do other designs, come back to it, had another idea. So sometimes things go like that. I'm not going to pretend to you guys that I sit down and make a design and it comes out perfectly every time and it's easy to make, because it's not. You know, it takes a lot of thinking, takes a lot of messing about sometimes. And obviously in these tutorials that I make and other people make as well, you just see an edited version of the design being made. You don't see all of the messing about. So that's what I'm kind of trying to show here. So now I just start playing around with some lightning brushes and messing about with the snake colours. I don't have much luck with the colours there, so I decided to move on to the text and mess around with that. And I'm just flicking through my text styles to see if one catches my eye, and I quite like this metally looking one. I do end up completely changing it though later on, and I end up actually building one rather than using a preset. So I settle on this green colour for the snake, which I think looks cool, but similar to how we made a selection of the tooth earlier so we could have more control, I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but I'm going to do the entire mouth so I can make that its own colour. So the snake's looking much better now, except the right eye, which I'm not happy with. So I'm going to make a selection of the left eye, which has come out quite nicely, and copy that over to the other side and blend that in. So we've got two better looking eyes basically. And then I'm going to change the colour. I finally end up thinking of something to do with the chains, and I end up trying to make it look like it's hanging off the sea. I think I end up repeating this step about 3 times just because I kept messing with the text, and I end up making a new text style anyway, so I had to redo this chain bit later on. After I find a colour for the chains, which is that red, I decide to change the text again just to kind of make it match. I feel like I'm starting to get somewhere with the design now, so starting to feel a lot better about it. Because I've messed around with the text style again though, that does mean I have to redo this chain for the second time, and I'm pretty sure there's a third time as well. Next up, I'm adding some green smoke just to fill in some of the gaps on the design, and then I'm going to use torn edges and grain on the sun. To keep the same colours as the sun though, I'm going to make sure the foreground colours are orange and yellow, so then when I apply torn edges and grain it will keep its colour. So my next bright idea for the chains has emerged, and I want to make it look like the snake is bursting out of them. So I found a 3D object on Envato Elements of a ball and chain, and I only want the sort of lock bit, and I want to make it look like that has been around the snake's neck and the snake has burst free. It was bothering me a little bit that the snake wasn't quite central, so I decided to use the warp tool, and that means I can make it a little bit more central, but it does mean I have to clean up a few of the other elements now that I've moved the snake. I'm just going to finish this design off by adding in some texture, and then we can move on to design 2. Out of the 3 designs I did for this brand, this one is probably my favourite. It came out so well, and I just really wanted to do an eagle design. I've been wanting to do one for a really long time, and I'm glad I got the opportunity to do it. They didn't actually ask for an eagle design, they let me get on with it and kind of do my own thing, and that's why I chose to do a snake and an eagle, because I've just been wanting to do them 2 animals for ages now. So I found this really cool stock image of an eagle. I think it was on Envato Elements, but it may have been somewhere else, I really can't remember now. And we're just removing the background and then tidying up some of the areas which haven't worked with the automated remove background button. If you've got a fairly simple image that needs cutting out, it's always good to try remove background, but with areas that have similar contrast, it doesn't really do the best job sometimes, but it does enough of a job to make it worthwhile using, and then all you've got to do is just clean it up like I'm doing now. After the eagle is cut out nicely, we're going to edit it in Camera Raw filter. So my goal when I'm editing photos for t-shirts, and most of my art to be honest, is I'm always trying to make the photo look less like a photo, which sounds like a really weird thing to say, right? But I think I got this idea from when I used to be in a band years and years ago, and we would commission people to do our artwork for us. And we hired one guy to do our album artwork called Colin Marks. He works for Rain Song Design, and he'd done a lot of famous bands at the time that I really liked. And I remember distinctly getting the artwork back and thinking, how did he make this? I've got literally no idea how you'd go about making designs like this. And I just ended up asking him, how did you make this? And he said, I make it out of photos, I do photo manipulation. And I just remember my mind's being completely blown. I couldn't believe he'd made this out of photos, and I started learning it straight away. I'd been doing graphic design up until that point, but in a very different style, and now the doors were unlocked to me, and I just started learning photo manipulation, everything about it. And I started doing something similar. I started making artworks for bands for a little while. But anyways, I know I'm rambling, but my point is I always try to bring that feeling back into other people that I had when people don't realise that these are photos that I'm making their artwork with, and that is just always my goal. And I never try to keep a photo looking like a photo, unless it's for a deliberate reason. I always find it hard to explain that story to people because obviously I'm using photos, it's obvious, right? And to you guys it will be completely obvious, but there are a lot of people you've got to remember that really don't realise how this stuff works. They have no clue how things are made like this. So anyways, that's my goal, and that's what I'm trying to achieve here in Camera Raw filter. It's not a normal technique I use, it just happened to work really well with this eagle. I'm kind of bumping up the texture, the sharpness, and it's just bringing out all this detail that would look so unrealistic if you were editing a normal photo, but for a merch design it just works so well. So now we're just playing around with the levels because the eagle looked a little bit bright to me, but I was kind of deliberately keeping it bright in Camera Raw just because I needed all that detail to come out. I didn't want anything to be lost. After we've done that, I end up noticing something weird on the beak, so we used the spot healing brush to just quickly get rid of it. I'm not really sure what it was to be honest, but it was annoying me. After that we can add in the text and start building the general layout of the t-shirt. So with this design, the layout was the only thing I really kind of struggled with because the eagle's such a weird shape. I really didn't know where to put the text, so I play around quite a bit. As you can see, I end up completely replacing that script text later, but for now at least we can use it to build the general layout. Now I'm going to fill in some of that blank space with some lightning. These brushes are from Envato Elements I believe, and some smoke brushes which are also from Envato Elements. If you haven't got Envato Elements, these brushes are quite easy to find. If you just type in lightning brushes on Google or smoke brushes on Google for Photoshop, you'll be able to find something similar. I like to drag out some guides from the rulers just to make sure everything's looking central. Sometimes it's hard to tell, and sometimes Photoshop lies to me and just says things are central and they're quite clearly not. And also with weird shaped designs it does also help. So just adding a colour overlay to the smoke. We could have obviously stamped the smoke in as a colour, but if you do it white and then just add a colour overlay, you just have a lot more control, you can change it a lot easier. And then we're going to build a text style for the Classy Beef text. I decided to put that right wing behind the text but leave the foot over the A, so it adds a kind of little bit of perspective. looks pretty cool to me. So we were talking a little bit about photo manipulation earlier, and part of that is making sure when we composite objects into other images that they look like they're part of the actual scene. And to me, this eagle looks way too warm in comparison to the background and the lightning. So we're going to head into camera raw filter again and adjust the temperature, and we're going to make it a little bit of a cooler tone. And what that's going to allow it to do is sit a lot better with the moody kind of background. And you'll notice that the eagle looks like it belongs in the image a lot more now. Like I said, the layout was kind of the most challenging, and we pretty much got the layout, but I wasn't happy with the script text, so I ended up changing that. And I go with a font called Squealer, which is something I used on the last Classy Beef t-shirt I did. And the font I used for the Classy Beef text is called Metal Lord. So these two fonts are very heavy metal vibey, and they just work really, really well together, I think. Metal Lord is actually used for the Iron Maiden logo, and the Squealer font is used for the AC/DC logo. So that's why they kind of have that rock vibe that you can't quite put your finger on. Now we're just going to add some texture to the design to make it look a little bit more vintage, and it's on to design 3. So design 3 is probably, well, definitely the weirdest one out of the 3. I'm not really sure what made me think of this design. It just sort of come to me, and it's probably out of the 3 the most simple to make. So this is a 3D object of a ribcage from Envato Elements, and we're just playing around with the levels just to kind of bring out a little bit more of the shadows and the detail if we can. And then we're going to apply a gradient map, and then we're going to add some noise to the image, which is just a simple way of kind of adding that grainy effect to it. So I start blending in some eyeballs in between the ribcage, kind of peeping through, and these eyeballs are from Envato Elements, just like the ribcage. The way the ribcage is laid out, I can't use a selection to blend in the eyes because it captures the back of the ribs as well. So I'm doing it all by eye. Hey, just kidding. But yeah, there's not much to really say here. I'm kind of taking my time with it. Obviously I've sped it up for the video, but I'm just doing it all by eye, not using any kind of guides or anything. Just trying to make it look good on its own. I'm taking the opacity out so I can see through the eye, so I can see where the ribs are actually going, and I'm just doing it like that. Nothing wrong with doing it like this, obviously. It's just that if we had the ability to make a selection of the ribs and then use that selection to guide where we rub out the part of the eye so it looks like it's sitting behind the ribs, that would be a lot more exact and a lot more precise and a hell of a lot quicker. Just to add a tiny bit of realism, I'm going to add some shadow around the eyes where the ribs are. And going back to photo manipulation like we were talking about earlier, this just helps to make it look like the eyes are supposed to be there and not like they're just kind of stuck there and someone can see that someone's made this out of 2 separate photos. And that's the whole point really, isn't it? We could definitely argue that because this is going to be printed on a t-shirt, no one would ever notice these shadows. But for me, I just like to do that. It helps the art just look a little bit better for me. Going to add in our text now. This is Old London font, classic, and we're going to build a text style that fits in with the colours of the ribcage and the eyes. For the last part of this design, I wanted to make it look like one of the eyeballs had fallen out the ribcage and then smushed on the ground a bit. To make that happen, we're going to use the liquify tool. After that, this design is finished. Thank you so much guys for checking out the video. I really appreciate it. If you found it useful, remember to hit the subscribe button and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace out.